Welcome back. Thanks for staying on board. John McGinness with you, News Radio KFBK. We're going to shift gears here. You know, it's Friday afternoon. Going to lighten things up a little bit. And it's not unusual. We've had many times we've had people with whom I've worked over the years, members of the media, who have written books and have chosen this venue as a means by which to share those books with the public. And oftentimes there's homicide stories, there's the public policy stories, the Capitol stories. We've had a number of former reporters that have done a great job in different efforts in writing. But this is a little bit different. Not to say it's not a great job, but I'm very happy to have Ed Fletcher in the studio with me. And Ed, good afternoon.
Hey, thanks for having me, John.
My pleasure. Welcome. And you have put together actually a movie. And it has to do with the salacious history of Sacramento and Orangevale.
Correct. I'm actually doing...
Who thought?
I'm actually doing two things. I wrote a screenplay about these news events here, and I'm producing a documentary.
Which is a big transition for you in terms of your professional capacity, right?
It is. As you know, I'm a reporter at the Sacramento Bee. I've been there since 2000. And about 4 years ago, one of the older editors at the Bee told me about this really unusual trial. And he mentioned it in passing. It sounds a lot like the Pink Pussycat trial.
Yeah.
And I'm from Orangevale. And the fact that he's telling me that there was a strip club in Orangevale and that it went on to have a impact on culture as much as it did was really shocking and jarring. So I immediately ran to the library and started looking up the news clips and trying to learn more and more about this trial. And it started off as something small, and it's gotten a lot bigger.
Yeah, and you and I talked a little bit about this, and I had some knowledge of some recollection of what had gone on, but I found that the people who worked in the Sheriff's Department was involved in this heavily. In fact, Sheriff Misterly, I think, had a strong opinion on vice in his community. He didn't want it there. But the reality is the people who were involved in that, the old vice detectives of the past, are either not around or, frankly, just not in a position to share in great detail the specific memories they had about that club. And I might have to remind you that this is a 3 o'clock in the afternoon program, so we want to keep it somewhat PG-13, I suppose. But here's what's unique. One of the big unique things about this is the court actually took the jury
to the club.
Right.
So to back up and to bring everybody up to speed here, so in 1969, the dancers at the Pink Pussycat decide it's within their First Amendment right to dance bottomless.
Yeah.
And they do so. They get arrested. Sheriff Big John Misterly was not having it.
Yeah.
And the DA actually didn't pursue the case right away, and they did it 7 times before the DA decides to take the case to trial. And then when he does take the case to trial, Judge Earl Warren Jr. Decides that the jury needs to see the dance to determine whether it violates community standards. And I guess under the guise that being nude isn't necessarily indecent, but it depends what you're doing while you're nude. And that was sort of a landmark case that generated press across the country, and it was ballyhooed and mocked and scorned, and it was an interesting.
And the result was
the girls won the case.
Yeah. First Amendment prevailed, right?
First Amendment prevailed.
And without getting again too salacious here, my sense is that if it's truly dancing, they probably were standing on solid ground. But if some of that entertainment transitioned into other forms of expression, into indecency and obscenity and profanity, then it would not necessarily enjoy protection from the First Amendment.
Yeah, and that's one thing you have to sort of wrap your head around when you're thinking about this case now. This is 1969, so this is the transition from burlesque and then go-go, and polls were not involved yet. It was much more demure than what we're thinking about now when you think of striptease or stripper.
Well, there were a significant number of clubs of that type in Sacramento County at that time. I remember them as a young guy, and throughout Carmichael, the area known as the Triangle, Fair Oaks and Manzanita, there were a number of them there. There were clubs on Auburn Boulevard, and that was the big craze. They were bottomless, and so I guess this particular location. By the way, there seems to be a common denominator here. There must be a feline theme because of the names of these clubs. That's as far as I'm going to go. But why? I don't know why it was that particular club in Orangevale that got the attention versus the others, or perhaps they came after the dancers prevailed.
Yeah, so the dancers prevailed, and essentially the club fought the law that was created. The law after this case was that they made it a health code violation to consume alcohol in the presence of downstairs genitalia. So that's really became the law of the land since that point, and you did see this sort of bifurcation of the topless only clubs and the full nude clubs. And in Sacramento, for better or worse, we've effectively driven most of that behavior or business out of Sacramento County.
Very interesting. Ed Fletcher, who has put together the screenplay for Do the Dance. By the way, there's information on it, dothedance.net.
DoTheDance.net.
If you want to check it out. If you have an interest in local history, if you were in the area at the time, you undoubtedly remember some of those businesses that kind of dotted the landscape out there. And it was a big deal. John Mesterly was the sheriff, and he was a no-nonsense, hardcore, iron-fisted guy that was not going to let that kind of conduct go on in his county. I'm aware of his history, and of course, I found things when I was sheriff that tended to document some of the things that went on in that era. But there's some big names involved in this as well. Some people that you discovered in the course of your research.
Yeah, Carol Dota is a curious figure. She was sort of the Paris Hilton before Paris Hilton, and she famously got breast implants before it was a common thing, and she was a famous topless performer. I had always assumed that at some point in time I would interview her for the purpose of doing this documentary. She passed away in 2015, so that was really the impetus for making to move this forward. The other one notable person in here is Earl Warren Jr., the son of California governor and Supreme Court justice. He still lives in Carmichael, and he's been very cooperative and supportive in all of this, and it's been very cool to have him help.
And I know you had a conversation with him. In fact, I know he actually attended the rollout of this just a couple nights ago. I want to get some details on that, get some more thoughts. A little bit about the story, the life story of this woman who was at the center of this, and what she did later in life. We'll get to all that after we take care of some other business very quickly. We're with Ed Fletcher. Ed Fletcher, who has, I guess, created the documentary film Do the Dance. We'll talk more right after this. Welcome back. Thanks for staying on board. John McGinness with you, News Radio KFBK, as is Ed Fletcher in studio. Ed's a Sacramento Bee reporter for a long time. Good reporter, I might add. Not that you asked. And is also the gentleman who has put together the documentary film Do the Dance. And that sounds innocent enough. But as you dig in, this is a kind of a salacious story, but it's very relevant for Sacramento's history, and it puts Sacramento County, I think, in a place that many people are not aware of in terms of some challenges to the First Amendment and nightclubs that existed back in the day in the 60s that were bottomless entertainment, topless and bottomless entertainment. Not to say that they didn't have a floor or a ceiling. You can figure out what I mean. But the interesting part is that Judge Earl Warren Jr. actually took the jury out to the club. And you can envision a busload of jurors going out to this club when it's closed and not in operation. But they observed. They saw exactly what the nature of the entertainment was to make a determination as to whether or not it was constitutionally protected expression.
Exactly,
and they ruled in favor of the dancers.
They did. The judge had expressed that there was a recent Supreme Court decision that basically said that indecency should be a local community by community decision, and so this case lands in his lap, and he decides that to fairly allow the jury to decide whether this was indecent, they needed to see it. And the second question was, where does the community end? And the defense argued that San Francisco should be considered part of this Northern California community. Mm-hmm. The judge went along with it, and that is what allowed this testimony from Carol Dota to come into play. So she also performed her dance, And if you talk to some of the reporters that covered it back then, Jeff Raimondo, Steve Swat, among others, they will tell you that there were some stark differences between the two performances. Carol Doda.
It is, remind you, it's the 3:00 hour.
Right,
Mom's picking up kids in minivans, but go ahead.
I think it was more of a Cirque du Soleil, and there were fireworks, there were effects and simulated acts. And the act at the Pink Pussycat was more of a she didn't leave the ground, she stood dancing, and it was more of a go-go performance.
Nonetheless, protected expression was the decision of the jury.
That's what they decided.
Very, very interesting. And again, I do have a recollection of those clubs just dotting the landscape. Auburn Boulevard, Fair Oaks, Madison, throughout the area. And I have to believe it likely had to do with some of the population components of this community. 2 Air Force bases at the time, an Army depot, Folsom Prison. I mean, the things that would perhaps increase the customer base for that kind of an establishment in this area.
Right, and you also have to think about this is the Vietnam War is still going on. So it was a very different time in America overall. One thing I did want to note,
but the Brady Bunch was on television at that time, for heaven's sake.
Right, but this is the counterculture movement. The 60s movement and hippie movement is sweeping across the country, and they're trying to influence society. And the people who were still in control were pushing back, and it turned into quite a battle of wills and of lawyers as we tried to sort this out. I will note that this is the law of the land in California, and if you've ever been to Portland, you'll see a very different scenario. Portland has more strip clubs per capita than any city in America, but they also have very different rules, and they behave very differently than what you see in California or Las Vegas or other places.
Very interesting. So what's the status of the project now? Where are you?
So we're really just at the beginning. I came 4 years ago. I came at this story, and I wrote a screenplay about it, and I went to L.A. to try to sell the screenplay and get it done. And what I discovered is you need a lot of money or you need stars to try to make a film at the level I was trying to make a film at. And then last year, or 2015, Carol Doda died, and I started to concentrate on the documentary. So I wanted to get Earl Warren Jr. on camera and start this process. So right now we've got a trailer. It's on the internet, on Facebook and on the open web. If you search dothedance.net, you should be able to find it. And we've produced basically a start of the movie, a 4-minute extended trailer, and we're in the crowdfunding mode right now. So we're looking for support. We're looking for money. And
just to clarify this, I mean, we're having some fun with this, but this really truly is a documentary, and it's a historical expression of things that took place, some level of evolution in community and society at the time. It's not a salacious sex story, obviously.
I did not plan to be an expert in this area, and I'm not a strip club guy. It just happened to happen in my hometown, and I happen to feel like I might be in the best position to move this story forward. So I've been gathering a team ever since to try to do this, but we're going to play it straight. I mean, we'll talk to people on both sides of the issue there, and people who will say that it's a good thing that we've driven the strip clubs essentially out of the Sacramento proper.
Well, you know, it occurs to me that like so many different cases, when you have a First Amendment issue in particular, there will be people who I think legitimately and strongly believe that the conduct that is allowed to occur is detrimental, is bad, it objectifies women, it's just overall negative. Nonetheless, it's precisely what's intended to be protected by the First Amendment. So I'll give you the last word.
Oh, very much a fair statement, but we want to engage people in this conversation and talk about whether this is female empowerment or sexual manipulation.
Right.
We'll let the experts decide, and we'll record it.
I think it's very fair. Hey, good stuff, Ed. Great to see you.
DoTheDance.net.
There you go, DoTheDance.net, and we will get that linked up to my website as well. So thanks for taking time out of your schedule. Good luck to you, and you can tell by the sound of the music, that's it for us.